you know what? Hello, everyone. Please get settled in your seats. Make sure you have your journal and your pen. I am going to be leading today's journaling session. On Instagram, I go by Alyssa Marie Wellness, but my real name is Leah. It's a Filipino thing. You get a government name, and you never go by it the day after you're born. You get a nickname. If you're Filipino, maybe you can relate, but I go by Leah, even though, on record, Alyssa Marie Wellness is what I'm known for. So I want to get a sense of just who is here in the audience today. Raise your hand if you already engage in a journaling practice. Okay. Raise your hand if the last time you journaled was within the last month. Raise your hand if the last time you journaled was in the last 6 months. Okay, so raise your hand if you don't journal, and this is going to be very new for you. Okay, so welcome. I have been journaling ever since I was little. When I immigrated to America from the Philippines at 4 years old, I would write letters to my closest cousin from Shindo Hills to the Philippines, and that's just how I started to really write about my day, how I was feeling. So her and I were always writing to each other back and forth. That's how I actually started to get to know my own internal landscape. And then when I was about 5th, 6th grade, I was gifted my very first diary, the kind with the lock. And I just have never stopped journaling since then. I've kept my journals throughout the years. Fast forward to today, I am a licensed therapist in private practice with a group practice. And I strongly encourage journaling for a lot of my clients because it is a great way to explore your emotional landscape. There are a lot of types of journaling. So there's personal journaling, which is what is the most common. This is where you write down your thoughts, what you went through, what you're experiencing, the things that are triggering you, and sometimes what you want to do about it. There's gratitude journaling, which is you write down some of the things that you're grateful for, and it sets the tone for the rest of the day. There's something called the morning pages, which is you wake up and you just start writing a stream of consciousness, 3 pages, first thing you do in the morning, just to help give you the roadmap for your day. So it can be just dumping anything, a list of things to do. And then there's bullet journaling, which is just writing out your list. There are many types of journaling. There is no right or wrong way to do it. I personally think there are several benefits to journaling. One is stress reduction. One is emotional resonance. And it's a place to get your thoughts and feelings onto paper to help you see things from a bird's eye view. If you keep journaling as a practice, you can also be able to see your patterns, and you can also be able to see your growth. Growing up Asian, you don't always talk about your feelings. When my dad is in America, because he's partly in the Philippines and partly in America, when he's here, I decided I want to learn the language that he speaks, which is Visaya, which is where I was born. And so I ask him, how do you say, how is your day? He tells me. And then I ask him, okay, Dad, how do you say, I'm not doing so good, I'm feeling very depressed? And he goes, I don't know. I can't think of the words for depressed. And so it really showed me just the limited language around emotional depth and communication with some of our family members. With that and this generation, I think it's very important that part of breaking the cycle is to be able to name what we are saying. And the way we're going to structure this is I have 3 to 4 questions depending on how much time we have. I would like for you all to reflect on each question, write it. I'll give us about 5 minutes. And then if anyone feels called to share, we'll do a little sharing before we do the next question. Okay? So the first question, it should show up on the screen, and it is cultural exploration. It's really small, but I'll read it to you. How has your cultural background influenced your perspective on mental health, and how has your cultural identity shaped your attitude and beliefs toward receiving professional mental health services? So I'll ask it again. How has your cultural background influenced your perspective on mental health, and how has your cultural identity shaped your attitude and beliefs toward receiving professional mental health services? give it about 2 more minutes before I ask for some people who'd like to share. Okay, is there anyone, can you guys hear me without the mic?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Is there anyone that wants to share how their cultural background has influenced their perspective on mental health? Okay. What's your name?
As a first-generation American, I find comfort and challenge existing between two worlds, which I'm sure a lot of us can relate to. As a proud Vietnamese, I feel grounded in my cultural value systems, things such as loyalty and work ethic. However, I struggled with having a strong voice as an independent woman in America, being raised in a traditional household that did not invite conversation. So the skills I learned for communication were part of my American identity. And when your parents don't communicate, there is that friction. That has, I'm older now, so I've accepted it, I've learned from it. One of my parents just passed away, and it was really eye-opening because it was like we finally were able to communicate because we had to, and it was like I could ask all the questions because now was the time to get the answers. And it's really beautiful for me to see my siblings growing up with my brother and his wife as parents because they are honoring our heritage but also allowing them, instilling in them this opportunity to communicate and become individuals. So I guess that has been a part of my experience, which makes me a lot of meaning to that experience as well.
Thank you for sharing. Is there anybody else that would like to share?
My family, there was no such thing as mental health. There was no room for any emotion other than anger. When I was unwell, I hid everything from my family. When I first attempted suicide, they were confused because they thought everything was fine. I had a job, friends, dogs, I was going out, having fun. After my first hospitalization, they told me never to tell anyone I was sick. They told me to conceal my diagnosis. They told me not to take the medications that I needed because they thought I would be a drug addict. And they told me not to see a therapist and that there was nothing in my life to be sad about because I live in America.
Who else has heard that?
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I'm going to move on to the next question. And this is on self-resonance. When it came to sharing and expressing your emotions as a child and a young adult, what was modeled for you growing up? And how have these dynamics influenced your communication styles as an adult? And often we will see these styles in dating, relationships, and friendships. I see some people squinting, so I'll read it again. When it came to sharing and expressing your emotions, what was modeled for you growing up? And how did these dynamics influence your communication styles as an adult? So when you think about conflict in your relationship or with your friends, how do you tend to respond? And how was the response growing up? What did you witness with your caregivers? And we'll give this about another minute. And for the recording in the back, I'll say it again. When it came to sharing and expressing emotions, what was modeled for you growing up? And how did these dynamics influence your communication style as an adult? Okay, does anyone want to share? Yeah, go ahead. Hi.
Okay, so when it came to testing emotions, I grew up in a very volatile environment where there was often sexual violence perpetuated. So I conflated expressing an emotion to having the violence either inflicted or just have some sort of extreme anger around that. So how that how these dynamics influence my communication style as an adult, I become very conflict avoidant. I often try to take the role of peacemaker, which is a role I've taken on since I was a child. And it's something that I'm actively working to not perpetuate, because I realize as I am conflict avoidant, that means I'm neglecting my own emotions and oftentimes emotions around me. So working through that now as an adult, and yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else want to share? Yeah, go ahead.
So I just said what was modeled for me was work. So you work more, you don't feel, don't connect, don't introspect, don't process, don't reflect. Everything is just do more, achieve more, work more. So I think that was modeled for me, and the way it influenced me is, unfortunately, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but I always wonder whether I would still be disconnected as an adult because that being modeled all around me. But I went into psychology, so because I became a psychologist, I'm now the one that is asking the questions and asking for reflection, asking for introspection. So I think it's a little bit of a shift there. But sometimes I reflect like, gosh, if I didn't, I would be so disconnected from myself.
And I just want to see, just a raise of hands, how many people experienced arguing as a way of communication growing up in their homes? And how many people just saw their parents cope by working more and working a lot? It's very, very common in our communities. And I'm really glad that you are all here to be able to practice these skills to self-reflect, because we become better communicators with other people when we can first get in touch with ourselves and our feelings. So I'm really glad that you're all doing this today. The third one is centered on inner child compassion. I want you to reflect on a time when you were feeling low as a child. I would like for you to write a letter of that version to your inner child, sharing with them the compassion, support, and love that you needed at that time. So if it helps to close your eyes for a few moments and remember that version of yourself and describe to yourself, how did you dress? How old were you? Who was your teacher? What did you look like at that time? So that you can channel the emotions to be able to write a really loving, authentic, and compassionate letter to that version of you, because our little younger self does deserve to experience the words that we didn't get to hear from our parents. And this is part of reparenting. So we're just going to take an extra minute on this one. This is also an opportunity for you to explore how it feels when you're writing this. Are you uncomfortable? Are you sad? Are you connected? Do you feel disconnected? Is there a part of you that is glad to write this, or is there a part of you that feels resistant to writing this? It's very important that you also pay attention to the process as you write to your inner child. Okay, so I know this one is a little bit more vulnerable than the first two. So if we have any brave volunteers, I would be glad. And if not, I would also understand. Is there anyone that would like to share? Yeah, oh, thank you. Go ahead.
I know you feel alone and scared. I know you go to school every day with the fear that dad will kill mom and you'll come home to find her dead. I'm sorry there was no one there to protect you. I'm here. I will protect you now. You are a strong and resilient little girl, and you have done so well on all your own. You can relax and rest because I am here. I love you.
That was beautiful. Did anyone struggle with writing a letter to their inner child? Yeah. Did anyone find themselves thinking, I'll do this later? I'm gonna memorize this question, I'll do it another time. Yeah. And that's just information for us to look at. You know, why does it bring up these feelings? And what is my relationship with my inner child? Do I try to forget them? Do they annoy me? Am I embarrassed by them? Or is it what they had to endure we don't want to remember? But if it's something that is avoided, it is also information to look at. This final question is, and in the interest of time, I'm actually going to shorten it, but I'll read the entire question, then I'll give you the abridged version. Exploring your inner dialogue. How would you describe your inner dialogue and the way that you speak to yourself on a regular basis? What are some compassionate self-statements that you can fall back on when you're having a hard time? And how can you incorporate these statements in your daily routine? This is what I'm going to abridge it to. What are 3 words you would use to describe the way you speak to yourself? And that's it. Just what are 3 words you would use to describe the way that you speak to yourself? Okay, for this one, I'll just take one volunteer before I close out. Does anyone want to share the 3 ways they speak? Yes. Oh, thank you. In therapy, we talk about our nervous system. And our nervous system holds the memories and the pain and the feelings and the things that we've been through. It holds our joy, it holds our pain, it holds everything. And it's so important that we tend to and love and nurture our nervous system. And we say that there's 3 ways to do it, right? There's something called self-regulation, and this is the way that we naturally cope. And it's automatic. It can be positive or negative. So it could be, I'm stressed, I'm gonna have a drink. Or it can be, I'm gonna scroll on my phone for 100 hours. Or it can just be, I'm gonna go to sleep, right? It's the things we automatically do to de-stress or to calm. Then we have, that's auto-regulation. Then we have self-regulation, which is the things that are intentional and deliberate so that we can feel better. This can be journaling, self-reflection. For some, it can be movement if used intentionally. And then we have co-regulation, which is when our nervous system heals when we are in the presence of safe people. So this can be calling up your friend and saying, I'm not feeling so good, can we go for a walk? I'm not feeling so good, can you come over and watch a movie with me, but I don't want to talk about what's going on. It's when we start to heal when we're around safe people. So everything you guys have been doing tonight is co-regulation. And I want to say journaling is a small tool that I want you to add in your mental health toolbox. And journaling is a form of self-regulation. It's a way for you to practice healing and connecting with your thoughts, feelings, your emotional landscape. Sometimes people are not available when we need them, and that's okay. And when that happens, we have ourselves. We can always fall back on ourselves and our own company. So I hope that this is something that you guys can all practice, even if it's just 5 minutes in the morning, once a week. But it really does help with learning your own internal and emotional landscape. So thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our grounding session. This is the All About Therapy session. And I'm going to introduce our panel and as well as just kind of like set the intention. We were hoping that this session would really just be all the questions you want to ask about therapy, about therapists, about training, about who knows what. But we wanted this to be open. We wanted this to be vulnerable. Just ask away. So we have Brandon Shindo. He is a clinician here in LA in a group practice. Brandon, can you tell us a little bit about you, kind of your interests, the things that you might help clients through?
Oh, most definitely. I'm so excited to be here. So my name is Brandon Shindo. I'm a licensed clinical social worker here in the state of California, and I work in my group practice called K&B Therapy, Inc. We specialize in Asian American mental health. I think really about myself, though, while I'm a licensed clinical social worker, going back on the earliest speakers, is really like this piece of like, I'm a fourth generation Japanese American, and I think that really helps to identify who I am and why I do what I do.
And this is Dr. Jennifer Noble. She is a clinician here in Los Angeles as well. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of your clinical interests as well as a little bit about you?
Sure. Thank you for having me. Yes, so my name is Jennifer Noble. I am a clinical psychologist here. I have a private practice. In my private practice, I focus mostly on teens. That's my favorite age group in the whole wide world. And I also focus on mixed race identity as well as anything having to do with marginalized identities. So that, of course, includes a lot of things, but a lot of my practice is dealing with more social structures that influence how we see ourselves, anything that has to do with identity development. So I could go on, but I'll leave it there. I did want to mention, I think sometimes in these types of environments, it's important to make sure you know maybe who you're looking at. I am a member of the Asian American community, but I am Sri Lankan and African American, so I know that sometimes phenotype is like, oh, how come she's here? She must know somebody. Like, that's fine. So it's one of my interests to kind of speak about that experience as well, so that's why I mention it. Other than that, I do parent work as well, so I focus my kind of second job. I know I was just talking about work and how my family modeled that, and I'm still working on that part, but I do on the side work with parents of mixed race kids to try to help them foster, you know, in their children a healthy identity so we don't see a lot of the same clinical things that can happen with a mixed race identity. So I'll leave it there. Thanks for having me.
So thank you for joining us. Somebody has a microphone, so ask away. What are the things that you want to know about therapy or other things that are kind of on your mind? We'd love to chat with you.
Is it on? Hello? Hey, it's so glad that I get to be here, and thank you all for the work that you're doing. I wanted to just ask your input and thoughts. When we talk about self, because I do a lot of therapy coaching and discovering your true self and all that, what would you say is a healthy version of self when we are both an individualistic and a collectivist identities? How do you really reconcile that? And then also another part of it is, as we're discovering our authentic self in the generational gap, because so many of our parents are immigrants, not having space within that, like what's a healthy way to assess, what's yours, what's not yours, what should you take on, what shouldn't you, how's a healthy way? I know part of it is setting boundaries and emotional awareness and all that, but just some guidelines to navigate that would be great.
I can start us off. I think that when we think about this notion of self, I always like to think about it as really identifying our core values. And we know that we're being our most authentic self is when we can be put in numerous types of settings and our core values don't shift. They remain the same. Some behaviors may change depending if we're at work or we're with friends, but the core values do not shift. And to me, that's the best way of kind of acknowledging and noticing that we are engaging in an authentic sense of self.
I guess I would add, I love gray areas. So when you kind of made this distinction of like individualistic versus collectivistic, I think a lot of us are in the space of being a part of both. And I think being, kind of connecting to self and really being your authentic self is realizing, no, I am influenced by both. I can hold both of those like world perspectives, and maybe even in the same situation, I can decide how I want to approach it. Am I going to approach this from a collectivistic standpoint? Like maybe I'm going to think about how this is going to influence the whole group, or maybe sometimes I need to say, you know what? I'm going to put my needs in front of the group right now and do this other thing. So I think just really being aware of having both of those things and not feeling like you have to choose, I think is important for self.
Yeah, self is all about perception. I think it's like, from what vantage point are you viewing yourself? And sometimes that is fully informed by, maybe the things that you do, or is it your job? Is it your roles? Is it your tasks in your day? But I also think there are, like Brandon was saying, those core things that make you you based on perhaps how you were shaped, how you were formed. And sometimes the self is realizing that what you thought was self wasn't really yours for many years, right? It was an adopted identity. It was something else that was projected on you for a very long time. And how do we shed from that facet of our identity? Which is why I think the journaling work that Leah had walked us through is so important, because then you're constantly questioning and updating and editing your version of self. That is actually an organic, evolving idea versus a static, this is who I am and this is who I will be when I leave this earth. And then the tension, self and other, and I feel like, I feel like I'm constantly torn in that space. And I feel like it is a spectrum with self maybe on one side and on the other, and sometimes I'm 30% somewhere and 70% the other. But I think there's something really lovely about Asian culture where there is this awareness of other, right? We'll bow, right? We will give these deferential actions because it is how we show that there is an other and that we care and that we respect them. And yet at the same time, there will be times when the other cannot speak for you. And what do you do with that space too, And so I think it takes practice, right? Constant action in one direction and maybe the other. But I think it's a very good question because I think we all navigate it every day.
Sorry I talk so much. I think something that a lot of people don't know that I think you all can educate people who have not had therapy yet is the process of finding a therapist and what questions do you need to ask your therapist, because I know that finding a therapist for me has been like shoe shopping. You got to try some on and walk around in them before you buy. And I think no one ever talks about that process and how challenging it is and what questions need to be asked.
That's such a great question, and I'll share from personal experience. When you're trying to find a therapist, I remember emailing 5 therapists my first day and receiving no response back. And I'm thinking, well, I'm a therapist. Like, this should be easy, right? But I think this is like where I always let people know, like, utilize social media to your advantage here, of like being able to see of like who is out there for you. I love to watch reels where you get a sense of their personality. Because when you visit their websites, everybody's kind of generic. Everybody talks about what they do, but through a video, you can start to see. And when you connect with people on social media, you're actually able to tap into their network as well too. And so word of mouth is actually one of the best ways to find a therapist instead of just looking necessarily at a directory or contacting your insurance. Word of mouth a lot of times will help you find the best fit.
I would say there's a couple things I was thinking about as far as questions to ask. I really think you might want to start with what are some of the things I want to work on. You can, because there's so many things, but I would say, like, let's narrow it down to a couple things. Like, I really want to talk about the relationship with blah, 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 or man, I'm really struggling in work, or, whatever. I can't speak up and ask for this promotion. Once you get that, then you can kind of say, who do I think would best help me with that? Gender, racial background, do they understand, like, do you feel like immigrant status has an influence? Do they understand that? I think then once you kind of get those pieces, it helps narrow down even who you're searching for, and then you can ask them about their perspectives on things. But if you just sort of blanket it out and you don't know what you want to work on, then you're just going to get someone that's like, sure, I can help you with that, and then it's I don't think it's a good place to start there. So I would always encourage you to ask, like, the hard questions if you can. A hard question would be sort of like, maybe not worded this way, but just like their perspectives on, like, race and racism. And if the therapist can't even answer that, and if they're like, well, we're all just one, and I believe that I don't see color, click, like, just like, thank you very much. I will be moving on to the next, But if they have some answer, or if you feel that they're struggling through it, and you're like, okay, you're trying and I'm trying, so at least there's a space where I can do that, But I think asking those tough questions is really valuable. And then I feel, I was just talking about this, but I think a lot of people, a lot of younger folks, I feel, are starting with, do you share some of my identities already? So, I want an Asian American therapist, I want a mixed race therapist, I want someone who had, who understands, like, growing up in a home with an immigrant parent, like any of those things, you're fully allowed to either look for that somewhere on their website or ask them. And if that is something you're like, okay, at least if you have that, you may not have had the same experience I did, but you'll have some reference point. I think that those are very fair questions to ask.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know if I have much to add. I mean, I think I always tell people in that first initial phone consult, the 15-minute consult, I'm like, ask whatever you want to ask, right? Because if I can't be honest with you in those 15 minutes, we may not be a good fit, right? If your therapist that you're interviewing can't just be like, you know what, I've never worked with this community before, and so I'm not a good fit, right? Because if that's what you're looking for. And I think I always respect a therapist when they say, I don't have expertise there, right? Because that means that they are actually putting your best interest in mind, And so can they, and what is the process of, like, I've had people say, like, I've had people ask about my dissertation topic, which I thought was interesting. But I've also, I tell people, like, you can even ask, like, well, what happens if we don't agree on something? How would you handle that, right? Because there are going to be times where your therapist says something and you're like, that doesn't make sense for me. That doesn't resonate. And it's the friction points between you and a therapist that can be really powerful for healing, or actually can be really damaging and detrimental. And so I'm always getting a sense of, how much humility does this therapist have? Like, can I be called out by my client and be like, you're right, I messed up? Or when I have a brain fart moment and I forget I have an appointment, and I have to call my client at 10 minutes in and be like, I am so sorry. Like, how do we repair, right? Because that repair is a model for what repair looks like outside of the therapy room. So those are all fair game, and I say ask away.
I was just going to add one more thing in response to getting your therapist to respond, or a future therapist to respond. there is research that shares we are notorious for like not being good at returning phone calls. Like, don't don't take it personal. Like, call again, email, find all the ways to be like, yo, are you open or not? I'm trying to be your client. Like, it's okay because it is difficult. I would read about that like early on and like in grad school and stuff, and I'm like, that is, who are they? Because that is so rude. I would never do that. And then I'm like getting all these calls, and I'm like, I cannot call you back, you know, like I have things to do. I have another client right now. I have literally 10 minutes in between. What do you want me to do? So I, honestly, on my voicemail, I'm like, email me. Like, hi, this is my voicemail. Stop. Go email me. Because at least I know if you email me, I could get at it at any other time, and then we can set up the, you know, consult or whatever. So at least for me, I don't know about all the other therapists, but I will respond to my email. So if you have multiple ways of contacting people, do it and do it again. And if you found someone like, okay, Dr. Noble referred me to you, blah, 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 put that in there like as visible as possible. I heard you know this person, she said call you. We're more likely to be like, oh shoot, okay, let me call them back. You know, so those are secrets, I think, of, because it's very hard. You might call 10 people and not hear back from anyone, like to your point. So you kind of, that's you advocating for your care a little bit. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
So what you're saying is when we email you, say Lisa Ling sent us?
If you know that the therapist knows her, so she's like, okay, if I don't know her, I'm gonna be like, I don't know who that is.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So I'll try to be brief, but just for some context, I just opened up this deck that I was putting together, but there was like a Pew research that was done that talked about how 32% of US born and 15% of immigrants, Asian immigrants, have said that they reported that they hide a part of their heritage, right, out of fear or embarrassment or whatever the case is. And then TAF, actually, one of the sponsors, did a study, the status index, and you know, one of the things they found was that Asian Americans are the least likely to feel like they belong in the United States, right? So just for one more level of context, I actually am launching a company called AANHPI in February, and the whole platform is about API influences in mainstream lifestyle culture, and wellness is going to be one of them. And the reason for that is, you know, my dad died about 3 years ago, and he was the last connection to my Korean heritage. And I remember growing up as a young immigrant kid, like not wanting to be Asian. I wanted to be French because I thought the accent was really cool, and I could be blonde and blue-eyed. And so I noticed too, I mean, based on that research, based on my own lived experiences, and other Asian kids I grew up around, there is that feeling of like not belonging, not being proud of who you are, and so that is why Hello Happy is being built. Because I feel like there's so much richness that we bring to this culture, even from a wellness standpoint. So I was curious though, based on your experience working with these kids or adults who have that part of them that are hiding, like what are some of the things that would be of service to them to see out in the world? Like how do you get them to be proud of who they are? So I was just curious. I'm also fishing for some content ideas. Thanks.
As I'm thinking about your question, I want to share like a little bit background. So I'm the grandson of survivors of the Japanese American internment camps. And one of the things that was shared early on was that we want to blend in. We don't want to stand out. And so when I came home and showed my grandmother all my tattoos on my body that are Japanese kanji, she was like, "What are you doing? You're standing out." And I was proud of it, and I was kind of shocked of her response. And as I work with clients who are really trying to suppress their Asianness or their Asian identity, one of the things we really explore is like, do you truly know your story? Do you know your family's story? Do you know your family's origin? And a lot of times they don't. And so I give them the homework to ask the questions. You know, some family members are more willing to talk to others than others are. But for me, as I heard my grandmother's story, you know, I understood where she came from, but it made me like, oh, I really want to embrace my culture. I'm going to get more. I'm going to get more tattoos. I want to really embrace my Japanese American side, because in that way, I'm changing the story for my kids, that they won't have to hear like, oh, you need to repress whatever it is. As we talked about like the intergenerational part earlier, we're changing the story, that we're changing patterns. And so I always encourage people, once again, you ask the hard questions, you ask about stories to learn about your people, because when you understand their struggles, you learn to embrace it.
Well, I agree. I mean, it's embracing story, or I would call it cultural exposure. I think that is just a really big piece of the puzzle. So if someone is, growing up in this society and you're told mainstream is the way to be, and you've tried so hard to erase yourself in order to fit in, it's kind of going back to the cultural exposure. I work with a lot of teens, like I said, so I think one of the ways I try to help a teen fight a little bit of that blend in this way is to kind of like rock their culture. So encouraging, whether it's t-shirts, hairstyles, stickers, whatever that kind of is a calling, whether it's tattoos, I don't know if their parents will allow it, but if it's a calling card of like, I am this, even if it's small, at least for a young person, it can really feel like, okay, first of all, it's a big deal because I'm going to walk on campus and they're going to be like, what's that sticker on your thing? And, oh, is that what you are? And it's a moment of like, okay, I'm being seen, and now let me sink into it. And it's like, okay, this is cool. I want to do this again because now you're asking me about it. Now I'm talking about it. And yes, actually, I do eat that food. And yeah, actually, we do speak that language. So I think it's a beginning place. Like rocking it on the outside helps you kind of bring the inside out,
Yeah, I agree. I think identity is formed through action, not through thought, as much as we would love to just think our way to identity. And so I think the confidence in that identity means I have to, in my own little ways, show that identity to this world that could have all kinds of reactions to me, and then see what happens. But we don't send our kids, like I have kids, so we don't send our kids out to do that without first kind of equipping them if they do have negative reactions, right? And so I'll say to our kids, like, well, has somebody ever made fun of your food, right? And they'll be like, no, which is interesting, right? They don't do that anymore, which is awesome.
They do.
Yeah, they do. My kids haven't experienced it. But, and it's one of those things where, like, I feel like we have over time inundated them with our sense of cultural pride, that they've internalized that with us alongside. But I grew up in a very white predominant environment, and I was like, I'm gonna run the other way from my Asianness, and chose all activities and did things that were traditionally not Asian, thinking somehow that would protect me. And so the hiding is a coping, and so let's give other people and our kids new ways to cope. And that is the learning of our stories. That is learning that you come from a people way far beyond you. And I think that's very empowering, especially if like your generation starts with the grandparents or you, then you have to go back and really understand what that looks like.
Hi, thank you again for everything that you guys have said. So a little bit background information. I'm a person with lived experience, but I'm also currently certified as a peer counselor in California, and also a certified substance abuse counselor in California. So I do counseling, and I work with therapists like hand in hand. I worked as a peer for about like 5 years. So I've had about 7 years as a career as a mental health practicing person helping others with mental illnesses. But now I'm at a place where I'm almost like any other therapist like you guys. I go to an office. I have scheduled for people like hourly by hourly on my Outlook calendar, and I'm like scrolling through my emails and checking like, oh, okay, I have to get them on Zoom and I have to talk to them and all this stuff. So like almost all my schedule is like full now, and it's getting to a point where I'm like, am I really gonna be able to like continue this for the long term, you know? Just thinking as like any other like clinician or a clinician that works in a community health clinic or something like that. And I'm just at a point now where I'm like, I got like really sick like a week ago, and I'm pretty sure it's because I didn't take enough breaks. You know, I just didn't take enough breaks. And I wonder if you have any advice for like being able to maybe take care of yourself better, or be able to sustain like working in this in an environment, mental health environment, maybe just even as a regular person, not even as a person with like lived experience or anything like that. But just thank you.
That's such a great question. And as somebody who struggles myself with work-life balance, I think that one of the greatest tools and assets that I have are a community like this, of being able to connect with my colleagues. And it's so great to be, I've met so many of you today that I've met online, but not in person. And I think like being in space like this allows us to recharge, but community also holds us accountable, that we need to practice what we preach. And so I think that the more that we can build that community, that we more have a safety net for ourselves, that when we are feeling burnt out, people will come to our aid if we can communicate that to them.
I think I'm going to go a little more concrete in that you sort of model indirectly how to care for yourself. Like your clients are going to learn how to care for themselves hearing about how you do for yourself. So you kind of, if you're saying, gosh, I'm not giving myself enough breaks, you start right there. Like I remember when I first started my private practice, I didn't think about all the logistics, I guess. So there was a few days where the practice was starting to fill up, because in the beginning it was very much like, oh, I guess I got a 3-hour break, I don't have any clients. So once it started filling up, I realized it was like back to back, and you know, you only have this little 10-minute window. I had to like run down the hall and around the corners of the bathroom, and there's like 3 minutes gone, you know, stuff like that. And then one day, I'm very much food positive, like I will eat, and if you give me food, I will eat it. So I realized I had clients and I didn't have a dinner break, and I'm in the middle of a client, and I'm like, I am so hungry. And after this, I have another client, and because I see kids, and they all get out of school, like, they all want after 3 p.m., so I have a few nights a week where I go all the way to 9:30, and I was sitting there like, I have a headache, I have 10 minutes to, like, grab, like, nothing, you know, like, in my world, it's not a meal, so I'm like, this is not holding me over, so my first place to start was like, oh, yeah, excuse me, 30 minutes on my calendar, that's my food break. Like 6 to 6:30, I don't have any clients. I've had people say, oh, any chance we can start half an hour later? No. Oh, I understand. Yeah, you know, we can always reschedule, but you're not taking my dinner break. And you're not, like, I have those types of things just built in, and for me, it's a non-negotiable. Same thing with, like, how I do the late nights. There's no way I could do 5 nights a week until 9:30 at night to see a bunch of kids. Sure, all the kids in the world could call and be like, oh, please, my kid they have soccer, da-da-da-da. These are the times that I have, you know? And so I think starting very basic, especially with the work that you're doing with substance abuse, it could be very draining because you might see progress and then boom, it's failure again. So for you, for sure, you need joy breaks. I would say meal breaks for the baseline, keep myself going, water, meals, and then joy stuff. You know, like actual 30 minutes to be like, what is going to make me happy? I'll just give a quick anecdote. My best friend, she's an immigration lawyer. I don't know how she does it, but she deals with drama all day, and then she'll watch like the darkest TV at night, like, have you watched this? I'm like, that sounds like death and destruction. And she's like, oh my God, it's so good. I'm like, no, for me, after work, 9:30, the Great British Baking Show. I'm like, oh my God, that bread looks so good. Will they make it? Oh, so-and-so went home. That's my stress. Like, that's how I have to survive, because I can't do all those clients and then watch, I don't know, How to Get Away with Murder. I'm gonna be like, I'm stressed. Like, I'm so stressed.
Boundaries, all of those things are so important. I love the joy breaks. I think I'm going to try that. I think in our work, the suffering is so in our face. And so you have to punctuate that with joy and ease. Like even like a great meal. That's restorative right there, right? And laughter, physical affection, those are things that heal your nervous system, because when you're in with other clients who are dysregulated, your nervous system is going to try to move in the direction of mirroring them. And so you have to tend to your nervous system to be able to show up and co-regulate with them. So all the self-care, right, that we talk about, but it's even more important in our profession. So I think we're going to end here. So thank you all for joining us for our session. And if y'all are coming in from, feel free to come back in and have a seat.
Hello. Hi. Thank you, everyone, so much for spending this time with us. Before we wrap the evening, I would love to bring my co-chairs up to just say a few words. Melvin Marr, where are you? Television producer extraordinaire. Oh, you're right in front of me. and my dearest Philip Lim. I mean, it was this seed that germinated this, so.
Well, I'm not really good at this like they are, but I thank you all for coming. Being new to therapy, it's changed my life, and just hearing you guys talk, it just, it's gonna stay with me, and so thank you guys.
Yeah. Does this one work? Yeah. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for making your way through traffic. Thank you for staying to the end. We started creating space because of you all here. We just wanted to create space for each other. Myself and my mighty mini crew, Linda, Rebecca, Amy, MC Mary Claire, and all the volunteers, Richie and Victor, and we can go on and on. Big Asian family. It's like a minivan of co-conspirators, right? We have day jobs, and we are also part of this healing process with you guys. You know, throughout the night, everyone's like, thank you, thank you, thank you. But you all have to understand how much you're giving me. Sitting here, listening to your stories, being inspired by your courage to share the stories, asking questions that help us all learn too. This is what it's about. This is really what it's about. Myself too. People say, why do you do this? And I don't know. I don't know, because I'm also on that journey. I'm also trying to figure out, trying to move forward by figuring out ways that I could heal my past. You know, my past is all around me. It's all around me at work, friendships, relationships, family. And I don't know if there is a quick and easy answer. I think it's something that we should have the courage, and will have the courage to travel along together to learn. I know that you all here because you're tired of feeling helpless too. We can help each other out of that, right? And I think that it's so important, because when I look out into this audience, God, you guys are so damn awesome. You really are. I see so much potential and power and brilliance, basically. And I think that the more we can just see each other, help see each other through things, you know, we'll get there. We'll get there. I want to thank, Lisa Ling and Melvin Marr. This is family, right? This is family, and for them to be here tonight means everything. Thank you, guys. Taff and Ride Back, and God, who else? I haven't. I'm terrible at this, but I'm learning. Wherever you are on the journey, too, remember, just make space. Just make space to give yourself whatever you need to make it to the next moment. And I think that we have to just recognize that we are a community that's becoming, and we're going to become so much better together. We should.
Yes, one more thing before we go. You're going to get a copy of
Sorry,
Dr.
one more
Jenny's
thing.
book. Oh, sorry.
Dr. J, quick story too. This all started because I call her Dr. J, but Dr. Jenny Wang, by a DM, right? A DM that was like, hey, I'm coming out there. How can I be of service? And it all took off from there. And I cannot thank you enough. I cannot thank you enough for your passion, your compassion, your leadership, your heart. She's the real deal, folks. She's the real deal. And I'm so thrilled that you all gonna get a copy of her book, Permission to Come Home. It's changed my life. It's really changed my life. I also...
So can we also bring Allie up? Because you're also going to get this incredible box called the Anchor Box, and Allie created this. And I just wanted to give Allie a chance to just tell you what's in this box.
Thank you. It's truly an honor to share this space with all of you. My soul is awake, and I am very inspired. Lisa's has these little blue boxes. They're back here for everyone. These are Find Your Anchor boxes. It's a grassroots movement aimed at suicide awareness and prevention. I created it because I've personally struggled and survived multiple attempts. And it was really just my journey in the mental health world felt incredibly clinical and corporate and sterile. And I was like, there's gotta be something better. I couldn't find it, so I'm a graphic designer. I was like, I'm gonna create what I wish I would have had. So it started out as my own way of healing, and now 68,000 boxes later, it's full of just good vibes and resources. There's a mixtape in there. There's a deck of cards, 52 plus reasons to live, posters, bracelets, a whole bunch of great things. And we're just all about anchors, which we define as the little things in life that bring you joy. They really don't have to be groundbreaking. They can be boba guys, they can be steak tacos, they can be Duran Duran, it can be This Is Life with Lisa Ling, binge watching over and over, everything and everything, and just those little things to get you through another night, another minute, and just really the power of strangers, and we're all about strangers who care. Because in the height of my struggling, my core belief was that no one would care. I didn't think anyone would even notice if I were gone. So I thought, if I could create something that showed you that strangers care about you, maybe it won't be so hard to believe that your friends and family do as well. So these boxes, please take one. We launch them just everywhere and anywhere into the world. We also send them directly to anyone who's struggling. We partner with schools, organizations. So take one, and I trust that you will get it where it needs to be. So again, thank you.
Thank you,
I'm
Allie.
honored.
Thank you, Allie. You wanna say anything? Okay, everyone. Again, thank you all for being here, and do me a favor. Take what you've experienced tonight and create space with your friends, continue these conversations with your friends, and perhaps most importantly, with your family. Ask them questions, and make space for them. All right, everyone, thank you so, so much. Don't forget, there's Annie's book in the anchor box. Thank you all so much.